Hey there, just quickly, this video is actually part of a much larger video that I uploaded all the way back in 2022. Heads up, there are some minor changes from that video, mostly that I no longer score on a decimal point system, so some numbers have been changed. Even so, here is the 10th Doctor's era, and let's get straight into it. When it comes to the term mixed bag, Doctor Who Series 2 is definitely high up on that dictionary definition. It easily has some of the best stories of the first 4 series, but also some of the worst. With Christopher Eccleston being replaced by David Tennant, the new era of the show is very clear from the offset. But not everything is shiny to begin with, and honestly Series 2 is one of those series of television that I have such mixed feelings on. It's difficult to say if I love it or don't like it. This series does have some high positives though, such as Elizabeth Sladen returning as Sarah Jane Smith from the classic era, Mickey having a much stronger presence throughout it, and just a general returning of old classic Who stuff, which is really cool. I should also state that for Series 2, I do count the Christmas Invasion as the first episode of it, as I think it just sets up a lot of stuff for the rest of the series, as well as not really fitting into Series 1 very well. Even so, this series was a massive rating success, and is definitely the thing that catapulted Doctor Who to becoming one of the mainstream hitters it ended up being for basically the rest of its run. And with all that out of the way, let's go straight in with the first episode. The series starts off with a Christmas Invasion, which is such a good episode in ways that it just really shouldn't be. The fact that this is actually Tennant's first episode as the 10th Doctor, despite the fact he's not really in it, just sort of works for some reason. With Rose obviously trying to come to terms with the fact the Doctor has now changed, it helps to elevate the story and allows the audience to be confused with her, understanding this is the same character. With many returning faces from Series 1 with Jackie, Mickey and Harriet Jones, it also allows the transition to go a lot smoother. And of course, the plot itself is actually quite cool, and it's surprisingly dark, to do with blood, death, suicide, all for a Christmas episode. But the biggest issue is that even though Rose and Billie Piper really do carry this episode, there's just not much Doctor in it apart from a couple of moments, and even though those moments are great, it does drag it down a little bit. So I'm gonna have to give The Christmas Invasion an 8 out of 10, but it's still a great story. For the first non-special episode of the series, it's New Earth, and this is another episode which has a massive mixed response online. And once again, I fall into the love it. It's just so funny. All of the hijinks that happen because of Cassandra's body swapping makes me laugh every single time. I also love the concept of New Earth after the original Earth was destroyed in the previous series, as well as the cat people and the overall idea of the hospital mistreating and basically doing genetic experiments. It's just a cool sci-fi concept that you couldn't find in any other show. It allows Doctor Who to stand out that little bit more and start setting up some more plot threads that would come into Series 3 and 4, allowing for a much better narrative consequence to this story, as well as tying up some of the loose ends from the previous series. It should be said, however, the plot itself isn't exactly the best. The idea is definitely brilliant, but the plot itself is a bit boring at times, so once again, another 8 out of 10, but still a great effort. For the second episode, with Tooth and Claw, we go for a much darker, more gothic horror style in a similar vein to The Unquiet Dead. Now, when I was a kid, this was my favourite episode of all time, as it was basically a horror movie, but as an adult, I see a lot of flaws with the story. The fact is that the first half especially drags on for a long time, with the werewolf not really playing much of a key point until the second half. As well as so many moments where characters are just like, oh, it's fine, I'll hold off for werewolf, even though we know they can't because their bullets aren't hurting it, but yeah, it just keeps happening over and over again in the episode, and it does damage it a lot. As well as everything just seeming a bit off. I can't even fully describe what's wrong with Tooth and Claw, but something's off. But when it comes to the positives, the werewolf looks great even to this day. All the characters in the main group are amazing, and Tennant and Piper bring some of their best performances for the series, so it's still a highly enjoyable watch. And for that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Time for some throwback now with School Reunion, a story which is actually really good and sadly overshadowed by, of course, the return of Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith. Now this episode is just great. I love the plot with the Krillitanes. It's weird, it's creepy, and it's got that school vibe of being in school and thinking all your teachers are evil, with a lot of the drama between the Doctor and Rose, with Rose finding out how many other companions he's had, and how he just doesn't acknowledge them after they've gone. It allows for the audience to fully see how long this character's gone on without watching the classic era. And of course, you can't talk about School Reunion without mentioning how amazing Elizabeth Sladen is as Sarah Jane. She just immediately gets back in the character, with K9 also appearing and being brilliant throughout. The only real issue with this episode is that, once again, a lot of my issues with Series 2 is that the pacing just feels off at times, and the story does take a while to get to the point. But still, great episode, 8 out of 10. Future showrunner Stephen Moffat returns after writing The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances for The Girl in the Fireplace. I mean, this episode has got critical acclaim for a reason. It is brilliant. The emotion that the Doctor and Madame de Pompadour have with each other is so good and enthralling to watch. The overall Clockwork Monsters are cool as hell. All the jokes about the horse and all the historical moments look brilliant and cool and so realistic. Honestly, and I'm going to rag on it for a bit, even though it's just a minor part of the episode, but Mickey and Rose don't really do much, and Rose is massively sidelined by the Doctor in a very rude way, despite the fact they'd already shown they like each other. And I think overall it does just damage the episode a little bit for me. I still adore this episode, I still think it's one of the best written, but all the Rose sidelining really annoys me, so I'm going to have to give it a 9 out of 10. It's still great though, absolutely amazing. Time for our first two-parter of this series, and it's taken a while to get there, but wow, do they pay it off. Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel was one of my favourites as a kid. Once again, I have a lot of fond memories of Series 2, especially this first half. The build-up throughout the first half, keeping the Cybermen a mystery, is cool. I just wish that they'd named the episodes the other way around. With all the parallel universe supporting characters being great, especially Ricky, who is just one of my favourite jokes. It should also be mentioned that seeing a parallel Jackie is really cool, and Pete returning, but not the Pete that we met in Father's Day, is also really awesome to see. I'm a big sucker for episodes of parallel universes. It's why I love Inferno from the classic era so much. With a lot of mention going to the Cybermen themselves. They are cool. Lumic is a great Davros stand-in. My only real issue with this two-parter is that the ending is very sudden. The Doctor's able to stop them by plugging a phone into a convenient phone port. But apart from that, great episodes. Mark Gatiss returns with the Idiot's Lantern, and it's easily one of his worst ones. Which sucks. Once again, I'm a Gatiss fan. I know most people aren't, but I really like his work. Whilst this one, it's just not great. I will state that the setting is really cool, and the sets that they get are awesome, with so many cool little set pieces, such as the Doctor climbing the tower, all done brilliantly, as well as like the racist man and the sexist old bastard basically getting told to shut up. All good. But everything else about the episode just feels so dry, so bland and boring. Even the main villain, The Wire, just doesn't have much going for her, despite the fact she's very original as a villain. A lot of it just feels very half-baked and rushed, and I feel like that's one of the biggest issues of this episode. It's just so forgettable, and it really does start to damage the second half of the series. Meh episode, 5 out of 10. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit will be number 1 on my list, and it may stay there by the end of this video. I just love this story so damn much. It's essentially like a PG-13 remake of Event Horizon, and with the fact that I love sci-fi horror, Doctor Who going full sci-fi horror is just so cool to me. And that's not even mentioning the amazing special effects, and of course the amazing supporting characters, minus the 2 soldiers that are basically just there to die. The rest of them are absolutely incredible. Along with the rest of the amazing supporting cast, of course, we have David Tennant and Billie Piper, who do their best job yet at solidifying the Doctor and Rose's relationship. It's just really compelling to watch, and of course, the Ood, instantly iconic with Satan himself being a terrifying presence throughout the episode. It's cool, I love it, 10 out of 10. I love this story. Up next is another mixed bag from the internet with Love and Monsters, and for the first time, I fall on the dislike side. Not exactly hate it, I just think it's kind of below average as an episode. I can appreciate it was like a last minute addition, and I do like the idea of a Dr. Light story. I just feel like for this one, they didn't hit it very well. Elton's an interesting character to follow, but since there's no real connection to him that I don't, personally feel, I don't care enough about him. I get that the whole episode is meant to represent Doctor Who fans and stuff, but I don't know, it's just that next level of weirdness to me. The Absorbloff is also a terrible villain. Peter Kay does his best. Oh god, it's just so over the top cheesy. No, I love cheese, but this is too much. So much of this episode just isn't very good to me, so I can't rate it much higher than a 4 out of 10. I can appreciate they tried something new, but it just didn't land for me. Speaking of last minute additions, we have Fear Her, and I'm just going to say right off the bat, there are only 2 moments in this entire episode I actually enjoy. I love the fact that when the TARDIS lands, it's the wrong way, and they change it again. I think that's a brilliant joke. I also adore the council guy. He's so damn funny. Everything he just screams about the council. Everything else about this episode, however, oh, it's bad. Oh god, is it bad? All the Olympic stuff. I don't care. It didn't even happen for another 6 years, so the fact it took place 6 years in the future is also just stupid. I don't like so much for this episode. Chloe Webber, oh my god. Chloe Webber. It's just so bad, and the abusive dad stuff could have been cool. I like it when stories go that dark, but this episode just misses that mark so badly, with Trish being one of the worst mothers of all time. Awful, awful episode. 2 out of 10, the lowest so far. Now to go from a low point to a high point with Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, the Series 2 finale. Now, when I was younger, as I've mentioned a lot of times in this video, Series 2 was my favourite series. As an adult, not as much. But this ending still just works for me. I love all the setup throughout Army of Ghosts, with all the jokes. The Ghostbusters joke especially still makes me chuckle. I love the interactions between the characters, how connected they are. Rose being so independent throughout this story because she's dealt with this so many times by this point. As well as finally giving us the answers to Torchwood, which is nice, and it introduces one of the best organisations in Doctor Who's history, and I really would like them to come back at some point. And of course, Daleks vs Cybermen. It had to be done one day, and I'm glad it was done as well as this. But there's a few bits and pieces that I just don't think connect very well. I think the first half and the second half do feel almost like different episodes at times. It's still a great story, solid 9 out of 10. So yeah, a massive mixed bag in my opinion. I have such mixed feelings in Series 2, and I'm going to pop up the rankings right now, as you can see. Massive range of different ideas, and let's change it to how I would order them. I've also just realised that I've rated all the 2-parters in the top 3. I think I did pretty much the same thing for the last one, so maybe I'm just a bit biased towards 2-parters, who knows? But yeah, a mixed bag. I still do enjoy Series 2. It does have some of the best episodes and my personal favourite story in Doctor Who history. But it also has some of the worst and some of the most average. It really does drag it down. And speaking of very mixed bags, now online a lot of people will say that Series 3 is definitely peak Doctor Who. And when it comes to its second half, I could not agree more. The entire second half of this series is incredibly good. But the first half, in my opinion, is a very average affair. I have issues with a lot of the first half of Series 3. I know most people don't, but for me, it just doesn't click well. I will say off the bat that I do like Martha. I think she does a really good job at counter-producing Rose, making her a lot more interesting by basically making her the polar opposite. Instead of a common chav kind of character, we've got a very sophisticated doctor in training. And with the fact she was the first black companion as well, that does help highlight how important this was for the entire show, and technically even the whole entertainment industry. However, there's just a few issues I have with Series 3. For example, the Martha and Doctor relationship I really don't like. But enough about that, let's go into the actual episodes themselves. First up is The Runaway Bride, which introduces Donna as a temporary companion before she becomes full companion for Series 4, and goddamn this episode is fun. No, it's not a great story, it's quite an average story, but I feel like this is just the talents of Catherine Tate and David Tennant. They bounce off each other so well, it elevates anything they're given. Now, I'm not going to say The Runaway Bride story is bad, but it's relatively average. It's fine, with some interesting plot points, but the ending and all the stuff with Donna and the Doctor are just so damn good. It's hard to take away how great this was, and for the first story without Billie Piper for the revival, it really helps show how the show can keep going even without her. For the first proper episode of Series 3, we have Smith and Jones, which arguably is one of the best first episodes of any of the series. You've got to love a series opener. With this one introducing Martha so damn well, it's kinda shocking how well she was introduced. A lot of people didn't like Martha to begin with, partly because she wasn't Rose, and partly, if we're being honest, because of racism. But even if we just ignore Martha being introduced, Tennant is on top form throughout the whole episode. The Jaduna really cool as a monster slash good guy. The plasma ball is also quite cool and really funny in a creepy way, with the whole idea of the hospital getting teleported to the moon just being so Doctor Who. My only real issues with this episode is that it instantly introduces us to Ten and Martha's relationship, which gets really rocky and it does annoy me, especially in this episode. Great episode, 8 out of 10. Up next is the Shakespeare Code, and it's fine. I know that this episode also has quite a mixed reception online, but for me, I just find it bland. A lot of the episode is paced very badly. So much stuff just happens or doesn't happen. There's so many scenes of just dialogue being thrown between the characters which don't actually mean much. I don't care much about Shakespeare. Like, I love his work, I love him as a person, but for this episode, he just comes across as a massive dick. With the Carinites being a very cool concept, but just not done properly. I feel like they should be brought back at some point, because it seems like there was more to do with them with the witchcraft stuff, but then by the third act they're just like, oh yeah, magic portal. Okay then. Also, the fact that Martha's race isn't properly addressed in this episode, it's given a throwaway line, is irritating. I wouldn't say it's a bad episode. It has a lot of good moments and good ideas, so probably a 6 out of 10. For the third proper episode, we have Gridlock, and when I was younger, I adored this episode. I know a lot of people still to this day adore this episode. It has got some amazing commentary, especially with the fact that we've now gone through quarantine, on all that kind of stuff. It has some great concepts on politics, politicians, as well as social issues, and all of that is really good. I love all the drug stuff, I love the Doctor and Martha's relationship, but number one, the CG, even for the time, wasn't good. Number two, the Doctor and Martha are separated, and this early on, separating the Doctor and the companion, it can kind of make them seem not as close as they should be. And then finally is the Macra. Now, as a fan of Classic Who, the Macra Terror is one of my favourite stories, and seeing them just devolved into generic Doctor Who monster, it's so annoying. You could have picked anything else for that. Why pick the super intelligent crabs? And also, all the stuff with the face of Bo, I just find a bit dull. Above average once again, it's a 6 out of 10. For our first two-parter of Series 3, we have Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. Mixed bag is not a strong enough sentence once again. All the concepts in this episode are done so brilliantly. But everything else, oh god. Oh, and Hoovertown's great too, but all the characters in Hoovertown, we meet 2 of them. One of them's Spider-Man, for crying out loud. And then the actual human Dalek itself, oh god, why does it look like it has dicks on its face? Why did he have to have tentacle face? There's also just so many annoying moments throughout it, like characters just keep running around the sewers over and over again. It's the stereotype of Doctor Who running up and down silly corridors. With, of course, Tallulah cannot go without a mention, because if Tallulah keeps talking like this for the rest of the episode, I might actually die. You know, for the actual concepts and some of them being filled out quite well, I have to give this two-parter a 6 out of 10. Speaking of unrealised concepts, we have the Lazarus Experiment, which is basically a two-parter shoved into 45 minutes. No joke, the first 30 minutes feel like one episode, the last 15 feel like a completely different one. And overall, I think the idea behind this episode is great. Someone wanting to reverse the ageing process to basically live forever. It's something that's always on the concept when it comes to sci-fi. This one's good for that, but everything else just isn't. Most of the episode is very, very slow. The third act is literally just suddenly turns into a gothic horror film with no build-up before that. It's just suddenly, we're in a church now, because I mentioned a church at one point earlier in the episode. And everything else about it is just dry, and of course, it can't go unmentioned, the CG was appalling, even for 2007. Now, this episode is so mixed, I don't really know what my final thoughts are, so I guess a 5 out of 10 for solid average. Speaking of average writing, we have the first episode from future showrunner Chris Chibnall with 42, and it's bad. I mean, no, it's not bad. It is bad, but not in a way that's normally bad. It's just a lot of concepts we've seen before, except done worse. It's basically a loose sequel to the Impossible Planet-styled story, but with the 42 timer going down, despite the fact it never sticks to actually being with the 42 setting and timer of the episode. It just drags it down, and then there's just sunray monsters that just keep possessing people at certain points, and the Doctor, oh, David, what did they do to you? So much of this episode is just so crappy. It just feels unfinished, like it needed another draft, because there's so many supporting characters, but I couldn't tell you a single one of their names, and I've seen this episode many times, so I can't give it any other rating apart from a 3. But thank God that we're finally onto this two-parter. Oh, it's just so good. I honestly struggle to find flaws with it. So much of it is just done so well. The writing for this episode is incredible. It's actually based on one of the Doctor Who novels from the 1990s, and it's just translated so well. All of the performances from David Tennant throughout this episode and this two-parter is just done so phenomenally. It just shows how good of an actor he is, being able to switch between the Doctor and John Smith. The Family of Blood are also terrifying villains. They're so creepy to look at. They're just performed so well that you can tell there's something off with them. I honestly just can't stop praising this episode. And it finally acknowledges Martha's race, which is something Shakespeare Code didn't. The entire ending and the Doctor's plan being really cool. Easily an amazing story, and such a jump up from the first half of this series. Speaking of jumps in quality, next up is Blink, and what else can be said about this episode? It's a 45-minute long horror movie, Dr. Light done right, with brand new character of Sally. Everything about the Weeping Angels is terrifying. The pacing of this episode is perfectly done. All the supporting cast are also brilliant and really highlight how well casting is to this show. And I honestly can't think of anything else to say. It's just that good. All I can keep saying is the word good and amazing and brilliant over and over again. All of this episode just works. The timey-wimey stuff just works. All of the scenes just works. It's gotta be a 10 out of 10. No questions. Now, I struggled where to put the Infinite Quest on this list, but I decided to put it here because personally I think it fits quite well here. Now, the Infinite Quest is kind of a tricky one to talk about, as it was actually an animated serial that was released on, I think, BBC 2 or CBBC. But it was edited together to be a 45-minute episode, and it is canon to this series, so I'm going to count it for here, and it's good. So the premise of this is that a crazy space pirate man wants to get onto this long-lost ship and collect a thing that can create whatever he imagines. It basically gives you your greatest desires. And the Doctor and Martha are like, nah, that's probably not a good thing to give to a psycho. The overall story is kind of bland, with lots of places being rushed through, but I have to give this episode massive credit for being animated. It does look surprisingly okay for the fact it was done on Flash quite quickly and very cheaply. And I always love when the show tries something new, even if it doesn't work. But for this one, it works for me. 7 out of 10. Then, lastly for Series 3, we have Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords. A lot of it just works again. It's another Blink scenario where just everything about this episode comes together so well. All the Yana stuff, great. All the stuff with Jack coming back, Martha's relationship with the Doctor and Jack, it's so good. Both portrayals of the Master throughout the episode, instantly captivating. It's really cool to kind of see all the characters as outlaws. Martha's flat blowing up is cool. All her family getting captured is also quite an interesting concept. I love seeing a dystopian future. It's just a really cool idea. I love how Martha takes centre stage, quite similar to how Rose would in a few episodes during that era. Then Space Jesus happens and just ruins so much of the story. It really does put a massive downer on it. It's a great story, it's just got a really bad ending once again. And that's it for Series 3. So, as you can see from my ratings, it's quite a mixed bag for me. None of them downright bad apart from 42 compared to last series, but a lot more average episodes. And when we change it over to the rankings, as you can see here, like I said, the first half I find quite disappointing apart from the special and the first episode, but that second half really does just up its game to like 1000%. It just knocks so much out of the park, and apart from Space Jesus Doctor, it's truly an incredible second half to a series, and who knows what comes next? Oh wait, I do. Because in total it's about 20 episodes. Now, I don't think it's a controversial opinion to say that Series 4 is where the show peaked for its revival, because, quite frankly, it just is. There aren't many issues I have with any of the stories. There's only 2 stories that I find more average than any others, and one episode I dislike, but it's the animated one and I'll get to it. I think a lot of it can kind of be attributed to Catherine Tate returning as Donna. She just does such a good job at doing both the comedy and the dark, heavy drama moments. And as I've done for the past couple of videos, I will be including the special that was technically part of Series 3 because I count it more as Series 4, as well as all the 2008 to 2010 specials featuring David Tennant, as they really do fit with Series 4. But yeah, I don't have much else to say. Series 4 is great, let's just get straight into it. First up is Voyage of the Damned, and it's not a great episode, I'll be honest. It has many issues, especially in the third act. So many characters are just there to die, and the overall tone of the episode is just so mixed between basically being a sci-fi version of the Poseidon adventure, but on Titanic for some reason. But for some reason, and I cannot fathom why, I love this episode. Like I said, it's not good. In fact, in some aspects it's pretty bad, but I feel like it's one of those stories that circles round to being so bad it's good. Everything's just a little bit cheesy and a bit funny to me, in a way that I'm pretty sure it was not intended to be. I just find it dark in a way that's so over the top, it's just enjoyable, and the angels themselves, really creepy villains. So yeah, I like this episode. It's not great, but I'd say it's good. I'd say it's a 7 out of 10. When it comes to great episodes though, Partners in Crime just really does peak. All the stuff in this episode just works. The only real issue I have with it is that I don't find the main villain that scary. Everything else, is so damn good. Everything with the Doctor and Donna is solid. Absolutely amazing writing, amazing acting, amazing direction. The adipose are so damn cute. I want one. I want one now. If someone can buy me a plushie adipose, that would make me so damn happy. I honestly can't say anything else about this episode. It's another one of those which is just really enjoyable, really fun to watch. And if I'm ever feeling down, I stick on Partners in Crime. It's a 9 out of 10. And Series 4 continues its really good streak with the Fires of Pompeii. Now, I know that this is also a bit of a mixed received episode. Personally, though, I love it. It goes really, really dark, and I like how dark it goes at times. There's a few goofy moments as well, just to keep it a bit entertaining, such as a water pistol bit. I also find the sisters to be a little bit weird, because they're basically just the sisters of Khan, but in Pompeii for some reason. But everything else about the episode I really enjoy. I love the setting of Pompeii, and oh my god, Catherine Tate's acting in the final parts of the episode, they're astonishingly good. I can't get over how well she does the darker drama moments throughout the series, and this one is such a highlight. I like this episode, I love volcanoes, I love the story of Pompeii, so putting it in Doctor Who, it's good for me. Solid 8 out of 10. Speaking of solid episodes, Planet of Ood. It's really cool. I love any time that Doctor Who looks into stuff like controversial topics such as capitalism or slavery, and this one does a really good job at it. It shows it how dirty capitalism can be, how dirty modern day economic systems can be around the world. And of course, the allegory for slavery when it comes to the Ood is done so well and so politely. My only real issues with the episode is that I like balance when it comes to commentary, and I don't think there's much saying on the positives towards the corporation. There isn't much positive to say, but stuff like the lady who seemed to not like her job suddenly being like, oh no, I'm going to go on the side of evil corporation, wahaha. Still a great episode, still another 8 out of 10, and Series 4 just keeps going up for me. Next up is the first two-parter of Series 4 with the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky. It's funny, there's so many good comedy moments, especially with Catherine Tate on the Sontaran ship with all the Sontaran stuff and the Three Fingers jokes. Absolutely awesome. I also like Clone Martha, she's a really cool concept. I love when sci-fi shows look at cloning, as well as UNIT playing a major role in this episode and bringing them back very well compared to the much more bureaucratic style they had in the classic era. We finally, after so many times of seeing the Sontarans basically on their own in the previous stories, we see a full Sontaran attack force, and they're quite threatening. They take out a lot of unit forces. My only real issue is that the Atmos stuff, and also I don't think many people would just, that many people would be like, oh yeah, let's just stick Atmos in my car. There's conspiracy theorists. This would easily have had a conspiracy theory or a billion over time. Still, I do love this story. Now we hit the first kind of more mixed episode of the series for me with The Doctor's Daughter. Cloning concepts, cool as hell, love them. Didn't have to do them twice in a row once again, but I still love the concept of this one and a lot of the heart to it of the Doctor learning to care about a family member again after all the crap they've been through with family in their past and a lot of stuff that's not been mentioned yet even in the show. It's really cool to see him come to terms with it. And of course, the I Never Would part, absolutely iconic for the 10th Doctor. Really good emotional moment, and the overall idea of this war only actually going on for a couple of months instead of the decades-long one because everyone keeps dying and just being cloned. That's really cool. I love all that stuff. The biggest issue of this episode is Martha. Why is she here? If her entire subplot wasn't there, it wouldn't affect the episode much, apart from to make the pacing a bit better. Still, it's a good story with some issues, so I'd say about a 7 out of 10. Time for another celebrity historical, and this time we have The Unicorn and the Wasp, where we meet Agatha Christie and damn, this episode is once again just so funny. I'm not sure how much of this is actually the writing and directing, or just Catherine Tate and David Tennant's amazing chemistry on screen, but this episode is so funny. I love this episode. I hate wasps, so seeing a wasp as an antagonist is just a positive to me because I really don't like the flying little gits. Just so fun. I don't even know what else I can say. It's just a fun, cheesy, Agatha Christie styled episode that actually features Agatha Christie. And I love it. It's fun, it's cheesy. All the stuff when the Doctor is poisoned is absolutely brilliant. All the stuff where the Doctor's accusing people and they think he's accusing them of things that he didn't even know about. Brilliant. Solid 8 out of 10. Great time. For our second two-parter of Series 4, we have Sounds in the Library and Forest of the Dead. So much of the episode just immediately makes you feel uncomfortable. Going into such a large area as the library and seeing no other people apart from the Doctor and Donna immediately raises suspicions before they even point it out. I also love the concept of a Vashnarada, something that's inside the shadows, any shadow but not every shadow. And of course, Alex Kingston as River Song, a character who by this point we'd only just met with this episode, but in the future, this episode has so much more meaning, and it's so much more heartbreaking. The ending of the episode is also amazing. All the stuff with Vashnarada taking everyone else out, the Doctor uploading River, all brilliant. My only real issue with this two-parter is I feel like the second half is very fast-paced in a way that sometimes it's a bit hard to follow, but apart from that, truly, truly great story. Absolutely so fun. Speaking of dark but fun, Midnight is next, and ooh, is it creepy. I know this has become, over time, a lot of people's favourite story, and I can definitely see why, but for me personally, I can't stand any of the supporting characters, and everything else about the episode is so good, it annoys me that I hate them that much. I get you're meant to dislike them and it's meant to show human nature and desperation. I do get that. But when I don't want any of the characters, apart from the Doctor, to survive, I don't care about your story anymore. I just want them to all to die. But apart from that, like I said, everything else about the episode is brilliant. All the intros to the characters, showing how much they connect with the Doctor to start with, very clever. I love the tiny claustrophobic setting and the monster itself never being fully revealed. Really cool. 8 out of 10. Speaking of episodes that a lot of people love in more recent years, Turn Left, and it deserves that reputation. I'm not saying Midnight doesn't, but this episode deserves it a little bit more. As I mentioned earlier, I love stories that take place in parallel worlds. And for this one to take place in a parallel world where we can see the effects of stuff that didn't happen from our universe, like the universe of the main show, it makes it a little bit more interesting, following Donna watching the disasters that unfold because the Doctor's not there to stop them. It finally answers the question, what would happen if the Doctor actually did die? Catherine Tate is also phenomenal throughout the whole episode, as is Billie Piper returning as Rose after little cameos throughout the series. And yeah, I can't say much more about Turn Left. It's just such a good story. It's so heartbreaking, and as a Dr. Light story, it works really well without him. 9 out of 10. It's crossover time with The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. God damn, it's a good one. Full-on Daleks destroying the universe-styled plot. With Davros coming back from the classic era, so well played, and he's so creepy throughout the whole story. God, this is such a good finale for the Russell era and for Ten's era overall. I know there's a few more stories after this, but this is basically the ending, and it's so well done. All the stuff with Harriet Jones as well. Oh my, childhood me was heartbroken at that moment, seeing her come back and then just instantly get offed. All the stuff with all the characters meeting up towards the end and flying the TARDIS together. All the build-ups with them basically having mini-adventures as everything's coming to an end. Oh, and we see the Shadow Proclamation. I honestly can't fault this two-parter. I know it has some minor issues. All of them are completely counteracted by so many more positives, so it's gotta be a 10 out of 10. Up next is our first episode from the specials that happened between 2008 to 2010 with The Next Doctor. Now, a lot of people take issues with this episode because of its very clickbaity title, and personally I agree, it should not have had that title, but the story itself is actually quite good. I enjoy it. I quite like meeting Jackson. I think he's an interesting character. I also really like the crazy cyber lady. That's cool. I also love the giant Cyberman. That's cool, if not a little impractical. Honestly, the issues of this story mostly come down to the fact that it's very, very slow in its first half. It takes a while to get really into anything, and it doesn't feel much like a Christmas special. There's not really much Christmas in it apart from the fact that it snows so much throughout the episode. It's a little bit too blinding, but I still think it's a good episode. It's a 7 out of 10. I just wish that it got refined a little bit more. Speaking of episodes that are in desperate need of refinement, Planet of the Dead. I'm not gonna lie, this episode is average. Average as hell, and for the 200th story of the show, sort of, it kind of puts a downer on the whole thing. But like I said at the start of this video, I'm gonna be looking at the episode on its own, not taking into account that stuff. So, story is fine. It's an average Doctor goes to a planet and has to save a bunch of people story. But it is so massively elevated, in my opinion, by Lady Christina. She's just really cool. She's the antithesis of the Doctor whilst also being their doppelganger. And Lee Evans' performance as Malcolm is one of my favourite, one-off characters in Doctor Who. It's so funny, so brilliant. I think that's kind of the thing that elevates this episode. The comedy and the character interactions are just done so well. You can kind of ignore the boring plot, but it's still there. So I've got to give it a 7 out of 10. For our third special of this little mini-series, you can say, we have The Waters of Mars, and it has a massively positive reputation online because it's just amazing. The idea of water, something that is so common, being the main enemy, I am shocked it had not been done before in Doctor Who. With how many episodes and stories there were, how did it take this long? And thank God it did take this long, because the story is so good. All of the characters are so compelling. David Tennant's performance of the 10th Doctor, especially during the final moments of the episode, out of this world levels of good. I can't find many faults with this. I love how terrifying it is. I love the fact it was a Halloween special, so they went full scale horror. I honestly just can't fault this episode. It's a 10 out of 10. Now, before the finale, let's take a little detour to Dreamland. A very strange episode of Doctor Who that kinda shouldn't be here, but also really should, as it is counted as an additional episode of this little mini-series. And I really wish that it wasn't made, I'll be honest. The only reason why this episode is not going to be my first 1 out of 10 is that I can appreciate that they tried something new. I can appreciate how different it tried to be with its more serialised approach, with each episode being about 7 to 8 minutes long. I can appreciate how it's a follow-on to The Infinite Quest. And can you notice how throughout this I'm just saying I can appreciate a lot? Because the story's really bad. The animation is... oh, it's appalling. I can't believe they actually released this and were happy with it. 3 out of 10, only because they tried something new. Now, this two-parter is about 2 hours long in total, and if you take just the first 90 minutes into account, it's above average, because it's got some interesting concepts. The Master's cool. I love all the stuff to do with the old people hunting the Doctor, and Wilf is an amazing companion. Cactus people are cool. Finally acknowledging what happened with Donna at the end of Series 4 is also great, but most of the other stuff just doesn't work. The CG for the Master, when he's got that skeleton thing, it's awful. Who is this cult of the Master? Why were they never mentioned before and never mentioned ever again? The random American guy. But that does also get us into the last 30 minutes. It is probably still to this day one of the best regenerations in the show's history. The moment that the Doctor starts aiming the gun at the Master after breaking through the roof, the episode is a 10 out of 10. And the regeneration, I don't want to go But alas, you did. So that was Series 4 and its specials. Overall, an amazing set of episodes, with about 20 in total, including Dreamland and all the specials, which makes it the longest series of the show. So, yeah, I like that, and for that I mean time-based. Don't get at me with like, oh, Series 1 had like 50 episodes or whatever. So these are my ratings for each episode. As you can see, it's pretty consistent apart from one quite obvious one. And when we change it over to the rankings, we get some solid numbers. Ignoring Dreamland, the lowest one is a 7 out of 10, which is a good rating. I think it's a good series. I think it's a great series. I really wish that the show continued like this. Next week, however, is one of the many reboots that this weird little revival era has, so I'll see you then with Matt Smith. Toodles!